Okay, Powermatic 75 dust collector modification. Continuing on, it's another day, and what I've gone is glued this together. This is the split ring and the narrow ring, which is going to be the top of the Thien Baffle assembly, which attaches to the existing collector. And then what I'm doing now is making the dust port to connect this to the machine. The purpose of that is so that I can backflow the filters, the new filters that I've gotten from Wynn Environmental. I'm making just a simple box. I've put some nuts with bolts that are captured here in some holes. I've measured this out using a template off the machine because these holes are not regular on the machine. I discovered that when I made the other side. So I identify it as front and back and up and down. And then I transferred those marks to each of the pieces and they've been drilled accordingly. So I'll be assembling that and then we'll attach it to this piece here. And from there we'll build up the rest of it. Okay, back to the baffle. Just a couple of details that I wanted to show before I put this together entirely, just in case anybody wants to replicate something like this. It's again a simple box that has nuts that are captured so they can be attached to the machine and to this portion as well. It has a slot on one end nearest the blower, and the purpose of that is for it to be closed off so that we can then divert that air and take the pressure off the filter. We can then open up this side, which there is a corresponding outlet that's formed when you pull this out here. So this will be closed off in normal operation, and then when we want to clean the filter, we'll pull this out, and that'll allow us to backwash the filter assembly. And again, that was just for the baffle box here. Okay, as you can see that I've now mounted this diverter box to the blower housing, and the next step is going to be to install the plexiglass and the Thien Baffle to the bottom of the housing, and that will pretty much complete the assembly. You can see the bell mouth is larger diameter than the original baffle on the Powermatic, so I need to have this in place before I assemble it, otherwise it does not fit and I would have to enlarge that hole. So I'm going to proceed with that assembly, and I'll bring you back to it. Here we are heading into the home stretch of the Powermatic 75 dust collector Thien Baffle retrofit modification project. We have a few remaining items to do. I've gone ahead and epoxied in this stovepipe into the bell mouth fitting, so that's done. We need to gasket this surface, which has got a kind of bevel to it, which will match the chamfer on the underside of our disc with some foam gasketing material, and that will permit a nice tight seal once this is put in place and that stovepipe is pulled up. We also have to devise a latching mechanism to hold this tight to the housing for the blower here. Additionally, we have some eye bolts that Wynn supplies, and I've twisted that eye bolt so that when this is tightened up, there's a flange on the underside of the filter, and this will hook onto that flange, and when it's pulled down, it'll suck that down tight to this. And the foam gasket that's on the underside of the filter will go in this groove, and when it's compressed, it's going to make a nice tight airtight seal there as well. Additionally, I've gone ahead and temporarily modified the band straps that hold the bag to the underside of the housing as well. It's not optimal. and I don't think it's going to be a permanent solution, but I can at least test with it. And another remaining item is to get the baffle housings, the dust ports, the slide-ins, the pieces that'll slide in there, completed. So I'm going to go ahead and do those items, and then I'll bring you back to it, and we can hopefully get around to where we're about to test. I just wanted to go over how it is that I intend to attach this Wynn filter to the machine. And also I should note that Wynn not only includes the eye bolts that I had mentioned, which I've modified, but they also give you small turnbuckles, you can see here, but that doesn't work into my particular design, so I'm not going to be utilizing these. So in the case of the Wynn filter, here's a close-up of it. The underside of this lip here is where these eye bolts are going to hook into, and I've got them, I traced out a this diameter, or a little bit smaller actually, for where I was going to put my eye bolts. And then they simply come up through that plate, and when I turn them, they're going to turn and lock into this lip. So I've got them in place over there, and I'm going to install them, and the next step is going to be to figure out those latches to hold everything together so that when I start it up it doesn't just leak out. Okay, so I've gone ahead and arrived to the point where I needed to fashion a hold down for the filter assembly to the main body of the collector. And I was originally thinking of a hold down similar to that on a hood on a Jeep. So I've made my own, and what I've done is I take one of these brackets that I bought at the hardware store, I cut it in half, and also I bend this end, each end, to a 90-degree angle, and I did one of these. Then I just put a couple of holes in it, and I have some J-bolts that I also picked up, and I drill a hole up near the top here, and that allows me to drive a nail, which I then bent so it'll rest on top of that, and then I have a spring that I put in place with a washer and a nut. And what this does is it allows me to put pressure or tension on that lid. It'll pull down, and I can adjust that tension. The spring itself, the best one that I could find there that kind of had the right tension that I was looking for was this very long one, so I just marked this out, measured it, and cut it into thirds, so I get 3 out of each one of these, so it's a pretty economical way to go. So total cost for these comes out to about, I have to make 6 of them, it's 31 bucks, so $6 each. Or so, with some additional nuts and bolts that I need to attach it to the collector itself. That wasn't in that cost. So that's where we're going next. We're going to put that on there, and I'll show you the finished product. Okay, we're into troubleshooting phase here. I just wanted to show you what we've come up with so far. This is the end product. We have the baffle. I'm going to remake those baffles. The MDF is too soft. I thought it would be alright, but I wound up with one bolt hole tearing out, and it's not optimal. It's not going anywhere, but it's not going to sit right by me, so I'm going to remake that out of probably cabinet grade plywood, multi-layer. That'll be strongest. So the attachment points for the collector filter. So we got the filter to the collector. There's this little spring-loaded latch. I had to put those discs on the bottom to hold the bolt upright, the J-bolt. Otherwise it would kind of cant outwards at the top and it wouldn't grip well. So I had those metal discs that you use for putting like foam insulation up. Put those in there and they seem to do the trick. There's one in the back, and got 3 in each one. Another one on the other side. I did run it, and I have some leaks, especially where the bag hooks on the bottom baffles. That isn't due in part to the bearing surface on the bottom only being 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to widen that as well, and probably actually going to build that up with 2 more layers. One larger so it'll capture it, and it won't slide down when you're trying to put the band clamps and the bag on. It's very frustrating to, you have it on and then it slides down, and you get it on the other side and it slides down and back and forth. So we've all been through it. It's part of dust collection. Optimal setup would be a rigid container, which I'm still working towards to get some kind of fiber container set up on the bottom. And the good thing about these filters is they are way shorter than the original setup. I have a good bit that I could raise this whole machine up. I would do that by unbolting that center portion and just putting some kind of blocking in between the base and those legs, and I could raise that up, and the same with those smaller steel legs on each end, and that way I could probably put some kind of a cam setup underneath the base of that barrel to push it up against the bottom of those assemblies to make it nice and airtight. So that's where we're at now. Like I say, it's run, except for the minor leaks around the bag and band where they hook onto the bottom baffles. It does separate very well, and there's a lot of fine dust in the bottom. I cleaned out what was in my table saw cabinet, and there was a lot of MDF and finer particles in there. So so far so good, and I'll post this and we'll see if anybody has questions or feedback. Take care.